people that watched every series, and you have people that just played the card game. Or either they played it casually or they played it competitively. Our experiences have been interesting because we've kind of had exposure to every piece of that from one extent to another. So we kind of wanted to give a brief overview of the entire franchise on a sort of high level to show that there is, depending on how you got into the franchise, there's something else that you're missing out on, whether or not it's another anime, a manga, or if you quit the card game because X mechanic was introduced, you're missing out. Because it didn't do as much damage as you think it did, and there was some really good and a lot of fun to be had in some of the formats over the last couple of years in spite of the changes that were made. And so we kind of want to talk about that. So I'll just do a brief introduction. So my name is Clinton Bradley. I have, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was actually my very, very first cosplay, all the way back in 2008. I cosplayed Kaiba back then, and that was before the Abridged hit like peak popularity. And so over the course of cosplaying him, the Abridged kind of went into the mainstream, and I definitely lost interest in doing the cosplay because the characters became one-liners instead of actual characters in the eyes of the fans. And so once we moved on from that, come 2015, when I finally decided, you know what, I never finished 5Ds, I need to go back and watch that, and fell wholeheartedly in love with it, as you can tell.
And you drug me down that rabbit hole again.
Yeah, so Michelle here, who's going to introduce herself, is my fiance, and believe it or not, one of the commonalities we had that nurtured our relationship was our love for Yu-Gi-Oh! So us geeking out over 5Ds and the subsequent series that followed is kind of one of the reasons that that we are together, and one of the reasons why we're doing this. So we figured we would spread that passion with all of you guys and kind of explain what we love about it so much.
So, Yu-Gi-Oh's been a thing that I've kind of been in and out of forever, and then I started dating this one, and I've been in it since, and I've always wanted to cosplay Carly since like 2012, and here I am. She's my first Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay. I have a whole bunch of them lined up, so maybe one day we'll see those. And once he said he was going to be Jack Atlas, I'm like, oh, dreams do come true. So, but I also never really played any of the card games, and now I'm playing the card games, and never because of him. All because of him.
By the way, who wants free cards? Yeah! Yeah! So everybody in the room gets one free foil card. And if it's not a card you particularly care about, hold on to it because it may tie into another prize later on in the panel. You guys can continue your introductions. I'm going to pass these out really quick.
I do. All right. I'm Pax.
I get a picture of you all.
I'm one of the people that were very into it as a kid. Probably, I guess, people could be your first anime. It doesn't really count because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Everybody watched it as a kid. Definitely got me into the game a lot. And I really fell out of it. Like you said, the Abridged series, while it was really funny at the time, when you cosplay Kaiba, you hear all kinds of stuff, and you just don't want to do it anymore. I'm sure you know. Yeah, didn't bring him for a reason. And you know, one day my boyfriend and I just said, you know what we never did? Watch any other Yu-Gi-Oh series. So it kind of jumped me back into it, and we actually became very good friends through Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay. So it kind of had a really big impact on me, and knowing that I had the opportunity to do this was very exciting.
I don't hear anything about anybody saying that they feel bad when people say about the Abridged series, and I'm sitting here as my Valentine. I know. I'm Danny. I met all of these people through Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay. I actually run the Florida Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay group, and one day just showed up at a convention as my Valentine and was like, yeah, she's the baddest you know what, and these two were Kaiba and Bakura, and I was like, oh my god, I love you. And now we're all friends and stuff. So that's cool. I've been in Yu-Gi-Oh for a really, really, really long time. I've seen the original a billion times. It's an embarrassing amount of time, but I think 5Ds is my favorite. I do all three versions of my Valentine from Duel's Kingdom Battle City and the Orichalcos, and I also cosplay Carly as well, because I just ship Polish shipping and scoop shipping, and then nothing else matters.
Quality taste, really.
Quality taste. But it's so much fun to get up and be a Yu-Gi-Oh character too, because these are characters we grew up with. They're characters that you can continue to identify with as the series continue, and it's something different every time. It's like, okay, what are we gonna do next? Card games on motorcycles, card games in the future, card games in alternate universes. Like, it's just so crazy, but it's still so fun. And while I don't really play as much as I used to, other than like Duel Links, it's still so much fun to like be into like the anime and continue to make friends. And it's something that everyone will notice and be like, oh my god, Yu-Gi-Oh! I used to love that when I was a kid. Or you make friends that people are still into it. So it's nice. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the gift that keeps on giving. All right, Bakura, here you go.
I think this is the first time I'm seeing this Bakura wig too, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. I haven't worn Bakura in a long time. My name is Ter. I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid, like everybody does. You'd watch Pokemon on Saturday morning and then Yu-Gi-Oh! Followed, and I was like, well, this is really cool. There's also cool monsters there. So you watch that, you fall in love, and then you start collecting the cards even though you don't know what any of them are. And then they get banned from your elementary school because everybody's trading them on recess. But that's just, it was a great way to grow up with Yu-Gi-Oh! And then I phased out of it for a while, but then high school is when the Abridged series started to come into fashion. And that's how we got back into it for the most part. And then we got back into it for real after the Abridged series. But now I'm just mostly keeping up with Duel Links and having a good time.
All right, so I really want to make sure everybody has an equal opportunity to speak, but the first portion of this panel is again going to be a high-level overview of basically the entire franchise. And so the objective here is we get through that as quickly as possible so we can open up the back end of the panel to discussion and questions from the audience. And the questions are going to tie into how you guys win prizes. So essentially, the more engaged you are, the better likelihood you have of getting a prize. So at the end of the discussion piece, once you guys get up and ask a question, then we will write down your name as you provide it to us and put it in the World Chalice. And then we will draw from it randomly for you to win a prize. Also, I just dispersed a bunch of cards throughout the audience. Depending on if you got one or two particularly lucky cards, will depend on if you get a really lucky prize. So I will explain that. So I'll go over the prizes we have really quick. So the base entry-level prize is a couple of keychains. We have a Yamayugi and a dual disc. We next have a special edition of Dark Neostorm, which you may be able to get some valuable cards on there like Brotar or Dengirsu if you're playing Orcust. And the next prize we have, this is a great item for anybody that is a fan of the anime, a collector. Not so much if you're competitive anymore, because a lot of this is a 2-year-old product, but it got a reprint. But a great product if you're a collector or a fan of the anime, and that is the Legendary Decks 2, which features a ready-to-play deck for Yugi, Kaiba, and Joey that features some of their more current support cards for their respective archetypes. So that is a really cool item as well. And then for the grand prize, so I'm going to be giving these out in a couple different ways. So we have a Figma series figure of Seto Kaiba himself. These are now out of print and kind of expensive. They go for around $100, and I have 3 of them. So the way we're going to be dispersing these is through the secret cards, and the one will be the final drawing from the World Chalice. So, these were donated to me by a friend of mine who is trying to open a physical retail store for his merchandise, and his little voucher is inside the packaging if you guys want to check that out. I'm sure he would appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and give out the first one right now. So who here in the audience got the Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon? Raise it up. Hey, you get a Kaiba Figma! There we go. All right, so let's begin the presentation. So, our bizarre little franchise had its debut in 1996 with the Toei, well, we didn't know the Toei anime yet. We had the original manga, which was, again, written and drawn by Kazuki Takahashi. And this manga actually did get a English localization. If you were to go to like a Barnes & Noble or something like that in the mid-2000s, you would buy this manga. And it is widely different than any of the, what we saw with the anime, the Duel Monsters anime that you guys grew up with, in terms of theme and story, and it has very, very little to do with the card game, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's honestly not a good manga. It's not honestly very good. But it does introduce a lot of the reoccurring themes that we see throughout the franchise as a whole. So there's this reoccurring theme with every Yu-Gi-Oh protagonist, with the exception of Yusei and Yusaku to an extent, is that there's some duality about them where they're trying to confront and integrate their darker side, like their shadow almost. So it's almost like they have this alter ego they're trying to incorporate into their personality and overcome, and that's a common theme we see with all of the Yu-Gi-Oh series. And of course, it's a very literal metaphor with the original manga with the spirit and the Millennium puzzle. This series has a lot of like little perverted fan service moments in it, and also has a lot of violence that, of course, we would not see in the Duel Monsters anime or manga.
Very little to do with card games.
Very little. But it was almost like this, the shadow games that he would play in the original manga were more about like, I'm going to set this person up with a game in which it's going to exploit their darker side, and they're going to succumb to it and therefore hurt themselves or kill themselves. And so he technically was just exploiting a existing fault of their personality in some particularly wicked people. Moving on. All right. So there was an anime adapted out of this. It was less disturbing than the manga. This is the Toei anime, and again, it's not that great. It has nothing to do with the card game, and I mean, if you want to go back and watch it, it is somewhat entertaining. There was a little OVA movie made off of this that I thought was actually really entertaining, where we see like the first real duel with Yugi and Kaiba playing the actual card game, and it's actually pretty epic. And if you can find that online, I actually would recommend watching that. That was pretty amusing. So the first iteration of the card game is the Bandai card game. Has anybody seen these cards before? Okay, so a few of you, but not all of you. I own a few of these. I had somebody dump off their collection on me, and as you can see, the artwork and the stats and the mechanics and everything is very different from what we got with the Konami game that you guys play to this day. And I don't think this was picked up all that much in Japan. It wasn't all that popular. Some of these cards have a ridiculous asking price too, especially the more notable cards like Red Eyes, Blue Eyes, and the Blue Eyes Ultimate, which is like a 4-card puzzle that you put together, and it's really weird. But not really cool nonetheless. All right. So everybody's seen the original anime. There's not too much to add to it, aside from the fact that I think it's the one English dub that holds up really well, and maybe that's the nostalgia goggles talking. But some little factoids about the original Duel Monsters anime. Obviously, we know about a lot of the censorship. Like, you can't have a conversation about Yu-Gi-Oh! Online without talking about some of the stuff that was altered or censored. So I think that's kind of a discussion point that's been done to death. But some of the things that I like to point out is, regarding the dub, for instance, the voice actor for Joey completely improv the Brooklyn accent. And that was something that was not part of the script. He just did it on its own and it stuck. And it is now such an iconic part of the character that now it's found its way into other works like Duel Links or like the card game, where there was actually a set printed that was all around Joey, and all the flavor text on the Vanilla Monsters was read in his accent.
Yes. I almost cried when I read it. I read it out loud. I looked at him, I was like, what?
Yeah, I handed it to her, and I was like, read this.
No way.
It was great. So this ran for 5 seasons, and we had an argument about what was considered each season.
I don't want to argue about this anymore.
I think most people have a very, very fond experience with the Waking the Dragons arc. I actually completely missed the back end of the Waking the Dragons arc and the Kaiba Grand Prix tournament when my first time around. And we don't talk about that.
We don't talk about it.
But I think the season that's held in like the highest regard amongst the fans is season 5, the whatever that one's called. But when we go back to ancient Egypt and we have the final plot revelation about the main character, it's really good storytelling. It's definitely the high point of the series.
Millennium World Arc.
Yeah, there we go.
Thanks.
So let's talk a little bit about the original era of the card game, so the DM era. So this is when the original TCG hit U.S. stores in 2002, And these original formats were very, very different, of course, from what we have today. So back in the day, you had not very high impact monsters. And in fact, the first couple of sets, effect monsters were very sparse, and they had very problematic effects that were very difficult to take advantage of. Aside from stuff like Man-Eater Bug and Searchers like Witch of the Black Forest, you mainly had insanely high impact spells. Cards like Pot of Greed, Monster Born, Regeki, and then cards that are just unfair and should never, ever, ever be allowed back into the game.
Mirror Force.
No, Mirror Force is fine. Mirror Force is a 3. I'm talking about cards like Delinquent Duo, where it's like, hey, I get to see your hand and take another card of it, and then you get to take another card out of your hand too, and I paid no cost for that. I just completely ruined your starting game state, and there was nothing you could do about it. Completely unfair nonsense. And this was something that really is a stark contrast to people who play Magic the Gathering or other card games, because other card games you have mana systems and you have to accumulate resources before you can activate effects. With Yu-Gi-Oh, all effects are instantaneous. You do have to pay costs, but those costs are always different and they're always specified in the card text. So most cards are just pure gas. Like you can just activate those spells with no cost at all. And that was what defined those early formats of the card game. Hey, welcome. Some awesome cosplays in the back of the room. So, moving on. All right, who here saw this in theaters? I did. So, funny thing about the Pyramid of Light movie, as it became known, is that this was actually not something that was made for the Japanese audience. This was something that was some kind of for kids forcing their hand because of the popularity of the show in America. But that being said, the animation was actually pretty good for its time in theaters, and it was entertaining as a kid, even though it had basically no story. And again, it's just like Kaiba refusing to chill and being a maniac, and just him finding some way again to have his petty revenge. Okay, moving on. All right, so after the original series had its run, we had another manga iteration that was introduced called Yu-Gi-Oh! R. Who here has read that? A few people. This manga is really good. So it's a completely different storyline from anything that was adapted into an anime. It's a little bit more coherent than the movie or some of the later parts of the anime. And it is a smaller, more concise story. And I forget how many volumes it ran for. I think it was, 9. All the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga ran for 9 volumes. From 2004 to 2008. Oh, I'm sorry, Yu-Gi-Oh! R ran for 5 volumes. I knew I made a note of that for a reason. I would definitely recommend checking that out. It's not too hard to find. You can actually still find some copies of this secondhand at used bookstores, and I'd highly recommend giving a look at that. There were some things in the manga that basically prevent the manga from ever aligning with the anime story from forever after, such as the fact, this is total spoilers by the way for the manga if you haven't read it, in Duelist Kingdom when Bakura confronts Pegasus and takes the Millennium Eye, Pegasus does not survive that in the manga. So Pegasus is gone for the rest of the DM manga.
Well, that makes sense. I already clicked. I didn't realize I said not.
All right, so GX. Who here has seen GX? All right, pretty much everybody. Who here has finished GX? Okay, almost all the same people. All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, so if I can address the elephant in the room with GX, the fact that the 4th and final season was not localized was pretty much the gateway into the Japanese dub for Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. And for a lot of us, we never went back. I'm actually the person that really defends the GX dub in terms of the casting. Of course, you have like the 4-kid shortcomings that you always have with like censorship and dumb jokes and stuff like that. But in terms of the actual casting, I thought it was actually really solid. Like I remember as a kid watching this when it first aired on TV and was anxiously waiting to hear what Jaden sounded like in English. And then I heard him, I was like, I'm not mad. I thought he was going to sound like Ash from Pokemon, and he didn't. So, Michelle, do you want to talk about GX for a minute?
So, I watched GX like a maniac. I didn't watch the first season first. I kind of like skipped around because I really didn't like Jaden that much to begin with. And I love Jessie, 2 tiers, in pieces, in bits. So, I still don't, when we talk about voice casting, I don't know why they did the southern accent. That's the only one I disagree with you on with that. But I like GX. Usually I'm not a fan of like the school settings. GX has a lot of faults with that because they have such a wide variety of characters and they kind of falter with like giving most of the story, like most of the characters in the stories a fully fledged story arc and character development. So much that the third season wiped out a whole chunk of them so other characters could have more story time because there was just too many characters.
Yeah, so you know that meme with like the guy and his girlfriend are walking and the guy turns around and be like,
Yeah.
that's GX in a nutshell. Like that's the whole cast and then Jesse. And so like GX, this is my only problem with it. Otherwise, for the most part, I enjoy it. But it underutilizes its cast to a painful degree. There's a lot of great characters that they just don't do anything with. There's also, I want to point this out for anybody that has an opportunity to see this. There is in season 2, when Jaden gets his rematch against Aster after he gets the Neos and everything, there is some painfully obvious like CG edits made to where like you see his hand in the frame and then like you see this digital edit where his hand is like lowered out of the frame and it's the most awkward looking thing.
I forgot about that.
Go watch that if you get the chance, it's hilarious. Alright, moving on. Alright, so who here's read the GX manga? Boy, is it good. So the GX manga totally redeems everything that was wrong with the anime. It makes it a smaller, more concise story, and it gives every character that was underutilized in the anime a lot more screen time and a lot more duels. It also has a pretty interesting storyline with the whole like planetary gods thing. I think that's a really cool concept. So definitely, it might actually be the greatest contrast in terms of anime to manga in terms of quality. So definitely check out the GX manga if you haven't already. So, all right. Who here's seen my favorite series?
Oh, yes!
All
Yes!
right. Love for 5Ds. So, here was my experience with 5Ds. So back in 2008, when it first aired in America, I was actively engaged in playing the card game. And when this came out, I thought this is a stupid premise, and it is. It has no right to be as good as it is. And I will say this, and this might be a controversial opinion, but I'll say that like season 2 specifically, the Dark Siders arc, as a standalone story, is the single best standalone storyline of the entire Yu-Gi-Oh franchise. It is remarkably good, especially in Japanese, where you get the full character arc of everybody, and. I love every single like opening and ending. I love all the characters. All the characters are used well. And season 3 being the weakest point, but even in season 3, there are some character moments that set up the rest of the series really well, especially with Aki and her learning how to do riding duel. Moving on. So this is where we first got our newest summoning mechanic for the game. So everybody's familiar with this bad boy. Should know what I'm talking about. So synchro summoning was the first extra deck mechanic outside of just regular fusion summoning, and it totally changed the game. To me, it was one of the most enjoyable extra deck mechanics, but so many people wanted to jump ship when this was introduced. And it's a real shame because in hindsight, this was one of the most fun eras of the game for me. Like this was like peak popularity for the game, where my local store would max out 56 players at a local tournament. Wow. Like Fire Marshal was like, no more people in here, this is too many. Just to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In 5Ds was at its peak. So I personally have a lot of fondness for the synchro mechanic, even though it did result in some pretty degenerate formats. All right, so the 5Ds manga. We are actively reading this right now and loving it to pieces.
You're a menace.
What? Oh yeah. Oh, like what? Me? No. Jack is a maniac in this manga. So who has read this manga? Okay, so I picked this frame to really illustrate how good the art is. The art is incredible in this, and also the Skull Knight from Berserk makes an appearance for some reason. And Yusei duels him, and he races him on the horse. The horse keeps up with his motorcycle. But no, Jack is a maniac in this manga because he approaches Yusei, and he is he starts out with a monster already in play that stops synchro summoning. He is actively trying to kill him. And like in the background in some of these shots establishing Jack, there's like just wreckage of other bikes all over the road. It's just terrible. But a lot of the other characters get a different, not necessarily a better arc, but a different arc in the manga that is much appreciated. Aki deserved this so much.
Aki and Yusei like totally switch roles.
Yeah, it's so good. I love it. And it also introduces like some new characters, like this boy over here who I don't care for at all. I don't trust him.
Don't hate on him.
I hate him already. His name is a pun. He plays an insect act, and his name is Sect. It's like insect. And his bike is a beetle, and it has like a beetle butt on it. I'm like, I hate this. This is dumb. All right, but the 5 Days manga is great, so definitely read that if you haven't already. All right, who has seen this masterpiece? So this is like 75 minutes of fan service, basically. But it ties into the main plot of 5Ds. It's actually canon with 5Ds. It takes place right before season 5 begins, and they actually directly reference it and use footage from it in 5D. So anybody that hasn't seen it, definitely take advantage of it and watch it, because it is a lot of fun. And the animation is pretty good too. But you can honestly finish 5Ds without seeing this, and it is short. It doesn't really add a lot to the plot, but it is really cool to see our first 3 protagonists on screen together just doing shenanigans. So go ahead.
Before we move on, it is because of the popularity of this movie over in Japan, there was an actual special dueling area where up to 3 people can actually duel at the same time against one opponent. And if you don't defeat that one opponent before he summons that special monster that actually ends the duel in one turn, you're through. That's how popular that
That's pretty cool.
was.
I didn't know about that. All right, next slide.
Yeah.
All right, who has seen Zexal? Man, I've got some hardcore fans in this room. I really appreciate you guys. All right, so I'm going to be totally transparent. Here's our thing about Zexal.
I don't like the English. I want to watch it in Japanese. Where are y'all watching?
I would be happy to finish Zexal if there was a legal place to watch it in Japanese. Crunchyroll and Netflix have it in dub, and I refuse.
I can't.
But I did go out of my way to watch the episodes with Anna because she's amazing, and I really have mixed feelings about this show, because this show was kind of a trendsetter in terms of the art style. All the series after this replicated the way the characters are drawn here, but other than that, like, I'm kind of at odds with it. I really would love to finish it and give it a fair shot. Right. But currently, as of right now, it's like my least favorite entry in the series. I think that's kind of the common consensus, but it started also this pattern of like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would alternate between a serious series and a kind of more goofy series. So you had original, GX, 5D, Zexal, and so on. Of course, that trend would immediately be broken as soon as Arc 5 came out, but whatever. All right, next slide. Jesus Christ.
Awesome. I've never heard of that card before.
If you don't have PTSD by looking at this thing.
I gotta get a picture.
Okay. So the Exceed summoning mechanic was even more generic than synchro summoning, where you didn't even have to have tuners. You just had to have 2 monsters of a matching level, and you could overlay them together to form this extra deck monster. It was a very popular mechanic, and especially the rank 4 pool of monsters ended up being the most impactful that the game has. The rank 4 toolbox, as it's known as. We don't talk about this. This is when the game decided that the localization was going to become a joke, and so all of the names, well, not all of the names, but there were quite a few names that were just like puns or just really jokey like this. Yeah, so that's a thing. The Zexal manga. So I actually own all of the Zexal manga. I haven't finished it yet. But much like the other series, I do appreciate how it is a more concise and smaller version of the same, of that story. And I really like Shark a lot in the manga compared to the anime. I like his arc a little bit more, even though you don't get as deep into his arc as you do in the anime. Who here's read the Zexal manga? Okay, a few people, not many. But again, ran for 9 volumes, and the promo cards that came with the Zexal manga were really impactful to the metagame, such as Utopia the Lightning. Moving on. All right, who here has seen Arc 5? All right, most people. So this series seems to be pretty controversial in the eyes of the fans because it starts off really silly and goofy. You have a protagonist who does not win every time, and that's kind of almost his shtick. I think he has more on-screen losses than like any other protagonist. But later on, this series really goes off the deep end and explores some really cool themes. The series was almost like a treat for the fans because they went back and brought back a bunch of characters from other series, and you got to see them on screen and do some things that they weren't previously able to do in their respective series. So we got Alexis and Aster from GX, we got Jack and Crow from 5Ds, and we got Kaito, and who else from... We only got Kaito from Zexal. And so we go through all these different arcs, so they travel through different dimensions and go to a dimension specifically for that extra deck mechanic. And some people, again, have some gripes with the direction the series took, but I think it's a net positive overall. And this is another series I would definitely recommend for those of you that are curious about an anime that's not the original, but you also really enjoy the card game, because it's definitely like got some good card game, like, oh yeah, I remember that, I remember playing that. And there's also like all these other variant characters of the main character. Like there's a protagonist for every dimension, a guy and a girl, and they're all awesome. They all have a lot of good on-screen duels. All right.
Why did you do this?
What the world?
I was like, what's the best pendulum monster I can put up there? So, did anybody here quit the game because of pendulum summoning?
I couldn't. I mean.
All right, one or two people.
Complicated.
No, I couldn't figure it out at all.
Yeah. So, this was
It's a winged beast card. It doesn't have wings.
It's a turkey though.
It's a cooked turkey.
So, pendulum summoning was by far the most controversial mechanic introduced, and people were very hesitant about it because they thought that it could have a irreversible impact on the game, because if you played a deck that used pendulums, you inherently had an advantage over somebody who played a non-pendulum deck. But if you quit the game because of pendulum summoning, I would really ask you to take a second look, because the thing is that if you look at the top decks from tournament results back in the Arc 5 era, the decks that were topping were almost never pendulum decks. Now there was a pendulum deck so degenerate that they had to make an emergency ban list to fix it, but that was only around for like 3 weeks.
Wow.
I unfortunately lost to it quite a bit in those 3 weeks.
Yikes.
But other than that, the pendulum summoning mechanic was never so dominant that it necessitated all this hatred for it. And actually, in the next iteration of the card game, they would actively go out of their way to retroactively make the mechanic more balanced. Moving on. All right. The Arc 5 manga is still being printed in English. All the chapters are available online, right? So you can read it online. I'm collecting the physical books, so I haven't finished this manga. But from what I have read of it, it is pretty cool, and actually deals with the alternate dimensions a lot faster. So you have like Yuto and Yugo a lot sooner in this series, in the manga, than you do in the anime. And so it, again, much like GX, those characters that you wish got more screen time definitely are utilized better in the Arc 5 manga. All right, who here has seen this masterpiece? Yeah. So, for the 20th anniversary of the manga in 2016, they went back and made this movie based off of the original series, and it is wonderful. So again, Kaiba being an absolute maniac.
Oh yeah.
Like, and they not only like they're like, how extreme can we go with Kaiba being a maniac? Like, I'm gonna resurrect the Pharaoh just to duel him again. I'm sick of this. Yeah.
Elevator to the moon.
Yeah, it was absolutely absurd, but the animation in this is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And a lot of the promo cards that came out of this were very high value for collectors and players alike, because there's one particular Blue Eyes card in particular, those of you know what I'm talking about, that has only been printed in this set, and it's why if you wanted to play a competitive Blue Eyes deck, it'll cost you an arm and a leg. And it's to such a degree that they have printed the cards that go with this movie 3 times 4 now?
We
Oh,
got another one that's coming out right now.
Oh.
in March? February, March-ish? Yeah, something like that. All right, good stuff. Hey, who here has seen Brains? Only a few people.
I went
Okay.
halfway through.
So,
I got
okay.
the Soul Burner, and I thought I was like, I was supposed to be excited for him because he's a cute boy.
okay. So I was very skeptical, and in fact, in the first episode, which is very different for Yu-Gi-Oh series, you don't get to a duel in the first episode. There's no card games being played in the first episode, and I was like, what is happening? I don't even understand any of this. And then earlier this week, I started watching a little bit more of it, and now I feel like I'm watching 5Ds again. Because it is one of those things where, like, this is a stupid premise. This has no right to work, and it kind of does.
It does.
And it has the same thing going for it, where it's a dark setting, it has a small cast of characters that are all utilized really well, and the art and the animation is brilliant. The sound design is brilliant too. Like every like sound effect in these duels is like expertly well done.
Oh god, that soundtrack though.
And the soundtrack is good too. And it's another series that like it's a series where we finally nail the CGI. Because I talked about how like I mentioned on a sidebar conversation earlier that like 5Ds was where we had a little bit of CGI, but not a lot. And then you get into like Zexal and everything is CGI. But like Brains really perfects that. It is a really good looking series. Next slide. All right. So link summoning. Again, very, very, very controversial. Who here quit because of link summoning? Oh, a few people. Okay. Again, I would ask you to revisit that decision. You're not obligated to do anything, of course, but this mechanic, again, it retroactively made the pendulum summoning mechanic more balanced. Because you move the pendulum scales into the back row, so decks that there was a lot easier for you to interrupt them, and you also had decks that were like stupidly fast and could just vomit a bunch of stuff on the board all at once that now had to play a little bit more carefully and invest a lot more resources into it. That does not mean we did not have some degenerate decks in the early Brains format, as you can see from this guy. This was a monster that if your opponent did what they intended to do with it, you would start with no hand. And this is also the only series where the protagonist's ace monster, Firewall Dragon, is banned because he was too degenerate. But that being said, they have slowly integrated all the archetypes with their own Link monster and given them some support, and it's given a lot of nostalgic players the opportunity to play with a deck they played with a long time ago that they haven't had a chance to do since then, such as, if you want to pass that down to Danny. How cool is that? Harpy Lady Link monster. That's yours, by the way, you can keep that. So, all right, next slide. All right, so, that did not turn out good at all. All right, so this would be the new manga that's going to air soon, but you can't even see this image. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, that's gonna be
That's
that.
the newest thing.
So you're probably asking, hey, when does the Brains anime or the Brains manga come out? Well, there is no Brains manga for some reason, but there is a new manga that is coming out. We've already seen some chapters of it that I think have fan translations. Has anybody read that? Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like I know I've found some fan translations, and as far as I'm aware, there's no official one yet.
Gotcha. Okay. So
We totally skipped on Pack Force.
well, we can have a sidebar about video games if we want.
Okay.
So that new manga. That new manga has nothing to do with Brains. It's an entirely new storyline that we haven't seen before, and we're already starting to get some of the cards from that new protagonist in the core sets that are coming out right now. And so we'll see how that plays out. So Brains has officially finished. So if you haven't watched it yet and you want to get into it, it's complete. You can now watch the entire thing. And the consensus is that it's very good. And it has finished at the shortest series yet, at only like 127 episodes, I think.
Not too bad.
And there is already discussion about a Yu-Gi-Oh! 7. We don't know what that's going to look like yet because nothing has been revealed. They just confirmed that they're making it. So we don't know if it's going to be something completely different or if it's going to be an adaptation of this new manga. We don't quite know yet. So we are now done with the presentation piece of it, and we have 25 minutes left. So we're going to open the floor up to questions. So what I want you guys to do is form an orderly line at the projector. You're going to ask your question. This could be like about anything: anime, manga, card game, just character stuff. It doesn't matter. And we're going to write your name on the back of one of these tickets.
Yep. And
put it in the World Chalice, and you'll have a chance to win a prize. And before we do that, I want to give out the second copy of Figma. So, who here in the audience got the 20th anniversary, the alternate artwork Obelisk the Tormentor? Raise it up if you got it. That I gave it out earlier. You have the physical card in your hand? Okay.
Some people didn't get. Some people walked in.
Yeah. There we are. Thank you very much. So we have one left that.
You may want to re-clarify about the holographic cards because some people walked in.
Yeah. So we gave out a bunch of cards at the beginning of the panel, and some of those tie into the prizes, but we only have one left, and it's going to be drawn through the tickets. So, all right. So, what is your name? What is your question?
My name's Kevin. When you first saw the Japanese version of the Duel Monsters anime, did it ever change your opinion of the dub?
So, I'll give you guys a chance to answer this too if you have an opinion on it, but not really. So, like, DM is the only anime I can go back and watch the dub again to this day, but I am really enjoying watching it in Japanese though too, because it there's a level of intensity with some of the line delivery that's really nice, especially with Kaiba. Kaiba's Japanese voice is fantastic. Again, but I'm not bothered by a lot of the censorship or changes with, except for one thing. So in Duelist Kingdom, when Yugi and Kaiba duel on the top of the castle, it's like their rematch. And that is very different in Japanese than in English. Because in English, he's like, oh, if you attack me, the shockwave will knock me off and I'll fall to my death. In the Japanese version, he's like, I will take one step back for every damage I take. So that is a very different implication, because he's saying, I will knowingly walk off on purpose to my death. Right. And that is a defining character moment for him, because that is him saying that I'm willing to sacrifice anything to get Mokuba back. And so that really, that's kind of still an inappropriate thing for him to do. But I still thought that was really powerful that he was willing to do that in the Japanese version. You guys have any thoughts?
Totally agree. So, yeah.
Sweet. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. So I don't play the TCG. Oh, Ethan.
Okay.
Yes. So I don't play the TCG, but I play a lot of Duel Links.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody who plays Duel Links, what is your main bet right now? Yeah.
Harpies.
Dragoonides as well. So I love being able to use like Divine Lance and just hit your opponent for 5,000 on the first turn. It's pretty great. So Dragoonides for sure.
That really messes me up.
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Hello, my name is Jesus, and I just wanted to ask you to know if you know there is an uncut version of the original Yu-Gi-Oh!
So I'd like to unpack that, because I've seen the uncut version of the first episode, but I don't know to what extent, like how much of it there is. How much of it is there?
Well, there was only like 9 episodes released because it was affecting the sales of the edited version.
I gotcha. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I've seen the uncut version of the first episode, and basically the only thing that has changed is like a few lines, and the cards actually have the full image, like from the Japanese version, on there instead of like the edited one that's just the portrait. It's pretty cool. So yeah, good call out.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Hello, name's Ryan.
Hey Ryan.
And I have that since GX, with Zexo and 5Ds. And you all know that the final season was not exactly done right, in which there were so many other cuts.
Mm-hmm.
Considering those three, for each of you, which you think was the best cut content that you liked from those that got cut that should have been in there? Especially like Burning Soul for Jack.
Let's start and just go all the way down. What episodes that are cut out of every series do you wish were localized?
Like from sub to dub, or?
Yeah, just any cut content you wish that was still there.
the entirety of 5 days.
Yeah.
Everything with my girl Carly.
Yeah.
The fourth season of GX? The way they get that in English.
Last season of 5Ds.
Yeah, so I understand why the fourth season of GX wasn't localized. I wish we had it. But aside from that, yeah, definitely the Team Tayo duel in 5Ds I thought was a real shame that was cut out. And yeah, Jack getting Burning Soul! Yeah, it was really kind of a shame as well. I appreciate your question.
My name is Michael.
Hey, Michael.
Over the course of your playing in TCG, what's been your favorite deck overall?
Oh, also Dragoonies in the TCG. So like, I played the hell out of that back in when the structure deck first came out. I also am a big fan of Noble Knights. A big fan. So right now I'm playing Luna Light Orchest, and pretty much So I originally built that deck just because we liked the art. And then the YCS happened in Atlanta earlier this year, and I decided to take that deck to a major tournament, and it actually did pretty well. So I love Little Lights to pieces.
I like Fluffles.
5 Nights from Freddy's.
They're actually really strong. Like, they rip
really
apart
cute.
boards like nobody's business.
They have smush beans. That's all I care about.
I've never played TCG actually.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
How's it going? My name's Wally. Okay, do you guys happen to know which TCG or Duel Links card art actually has a reference to an American movie on it?
Reference to an American... Oh, well, Cosmos, for sure.
Well, Cosmos aren't in Duel Links yet.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
I'm thinking of Scrap Factory, because if you look in the little vat of molten iron, there's an arm.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that. That's pretty cool. I think we need a specific amount of time to give out the prizes. So I may have to. Actually, I think we're okay. I don't think I have to cut it off. We've got enough time. What's that, man?
Hey, Jonathan, if you want to write it down. Whichever one.
You've been at all of my panels this weekend.
Yeah, man. I love you, bud.
I appreciate
What's your
it.
first name?
Yeah, you finally learned my name after a year.
It's like also the third or fourth cosplay I've seen you in this weekend.
Yeah, this would be the fifth one.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm insane.
What's the question?
So you kind of briefly touched on some of the stuff that kind of got changed between, but in the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga, they had like a different game per week, and my favorite one from that was the Monster World board that Picora had, because it's straight up RPG. But in addition to that, Dungeon Dice Monsters, which I brought with me. That one was also changed story-wise. So like, what is one of your favorite story changes that was made between the manga and anime?
Oh, just period storyline changes that was changed from anime to manga, or
yeah.
Oh.
Since the anime kind of came and then the manga was written after.
My favorite thing that's in a manga but not in an anime. It honestly might be the planetary god things from GX. Is that, or it's just the fact that like Chaz is so much better in the GX manga than in the anime? What do you guys think?
I mean, I haven't read it.
Personally, one of the things that got me back into Yu-Gi-Oh was finding out that it was so dark before it was dubbed. And when I got my hands on the manga, the first one, when Atem tricked that man into letting himself on fire was personally my favorite. I know I don't have a lot of reading, but I do have a lot of reading to do. But that's something that stuck with me for sure.
Sweet, appreciate it, man.
Hi, I'm Megan.
Hey, Megan.
What GX character would you like more development for? In the show, we talked about how on the third season, all of them were kind of like removed.
Yeah, you got this one. I have a comment, but you got this one.
Alexis. She got gypped.
Yeah.
Out of all the female pro tags, Alexis got gypped.
So my thought is, you could literally take Zane, Chaz, and Aster and make them the same character. You could find a way. Yeah, but don't. But you could. But let's think about it for a second. You could take Aster's backstory with his parents and give that to Zane and Cyrus and make them like orphaned, and then you have like You see what I mean? Like, there's no reason why we have to have a different. There's no reason we have to have a different rival every season with GX, and it just seems like. So, I agree with that, but I almost wish that. I just consolidate them into fewer characters, really.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
What do you have, Danny?
I love Jim. I love Jim so much. I also love Fubuki or Atticus.
Yeah.
Oh, the best boy. But there's just so many good characters in GX. I'm very passionate about GX.
Oh my god, so like Atticus dips out in like the second season and then he shows back up in the
He was so mysterious in the first season, and it's all like, who is this man? And then he's just a Hawaiian shirt wearing ukulele surfing man.
And let's not.
He's
I tried to
wonderful.
get Chaz to date his sister. It's the weirdest thing.
Let's not forget about Bastion, who is so forgettable that it actually becomes a joke within the series. Yeah, exactly. So like there's actually a line that I think Cyrus says where it's like, "Oh, I forgot you were here." Like he literally says it out loud. And then in season 3, when they're in the spirit world, or whatever, and he's like, he shows up wearing like that trench coat. He's like walking through the desert. It's like, where have you been the entire series?
He's been there the whole time.
Thank you for your question. What's your name?
Elliot.
Elliot. Okay. What's your question?
Have you played any of the Yu-Gi-Oh video games, and are there any you actually like?
I'm so glad you asked.
I'm so glad you. I played Tag Force 2, 4, and 5. And I liked 5 the best, other than, like, apparently Tag Force 3 allows you to be a girl, and then all of a sudden they decided not to do that. But I'm fine with it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so I have a very strong relationship with Duels of the Roses. So much so that my dream Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay is Christian Rosencruz or Seto. So like, what's hilarious about that game is if you try to explain that to somebody who's not a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, it just sounds like the dumbest thing they've ever heard. So it's like, we have a retelling of War of the Roses, and like if you really unpack the dialogue, it's really funny because it's like, my name is Henry VII, but you can call me Yugi. It's really funny. So, but I'm also like, so Forbidden Memories has an awesome online community, especially the speedrun community for Forbidden Memories. And then I like the newest iterations of like Millennium Duels and the Legacy of the Duelist, the Switch game that just came out. And then actually on Thursday in the Super Happy Fun sale, I just swept a guy's table of all his Game Boy Advance Yu-Gi-Oh games. So I'm going to be going through that backlog and playing all of them. He was selling them for like $5 each, so I'm like, sure.
Walks up to me and hands me a handful of Yu-Gi-Oh games. I'm like, what? Thank you.
Y'all have any addition to that?
I've only ever played Duels of the Roses, and I wanted to die a little bit.
Yeah.
Understandable.
So all the Yu-Gi-Oh video games have a really steep learning curve, but once you get into them, they're really replayable. So, what's the name?
Katie, what's the worst deck to play you guys have played?
So the worst deck to play, that really depends on the format, like no, not even Ojamas. Ojamas are playable. It depends on like what era of the card game we're talking about, because there's usually a way to optimize any strategy if you apply the right cards to it. But there's a lot. Every era, every set that's released has a deck that was just never fully realized, unfortunately. So like, Vrains had Vendreads, which have to have the coolest lore of any archetype invented. It's basically like Resident Evil meets Spawn, where you have like this guy who's like going through this zombie-infested city trying to avenge his girlfriend. And it's really cool, like from a lore standpoint, but it's so unplayable. You just can't win with that deck at all. But like, there's a lot of decks like that, and there's also a lot of cards that Konami makes that are just intentionally bad. Like Pot of Generosity that just gives your opponent free cards for no reason. And so occasionally they'll do that, but I don't think there's an objectively worse deck because you can find a way to optimize any strategy really. But that's a good question. I appreciate it.
What's your name?
I'm Beck Cross. What is your favorite duel? Period.
In all the anime?
All the anime, if there's something in the manga, if you really, really liked one of the other games that Yugi played, Season 0.
Ooh, I really like. So I'll mention a few. I really love the tag duel in post virtual world arc in DM. The tag duel with, is it Yugi, Joey, Kaiba, Merrick? In the that was awesome. And then I have mixed feelings about the WRGP and 5Ds. But like Jack always loses horribly during the WRGP, and like it's just a device to get Yusei in and just clean house. But like when my favorite Jack moment is during the WRGP where like they finally go up against Iliaster, and Jack just cleans two of them out right in the very beginning. Of course, that was by design, but it was just so cool that like he just relentlessly beats down two of them before they even get a chance. And I just like, oh, he earned that so much after all the crap he went through leading up to that. But what do you guys think?
They're all good.
They are all good.
I think the only time I like, you have an answer, you go, Joey. Turn it on.
Yeah, interesting.
In
In Dark Side of Dimensions, when what's the antagonist's name? I actually forgot. Agami. When Kaiba runs into him in like the ruins, and he's like, "This shit's fake," but he's like tearing him apart.
Seems fake, but okay.
Yeah, like visually, that was insane. Like I was on the edge of my seat. Like this stubborn asshole is gonna get it, and he did.
I mean, I still have feelings over the Yubel Jesse fight in Zane. That gives me some feels still.
Oh,
You're about to get that.
Yeah. My favorite GX, or one of my favorite GX ones, is definitely O'Brien versus Supreme King.
Ooh.
That was great. I did not expect that to go the way it did at all. So, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Hi.
What's your name?
Mike. What is your least favorite monster archetype?
Oh, my personal least favorite. There's gotta be one that's got like stupid artwork or something. My least favorite, not even Ojamas. Like Ojamas are funny at least. What was most annoying to? I can't even say that. So like this year, the tournament setting was a little aggravating because literally every single round in a major tournament, you would play a $30 structure deck in the form of Salamangreat. And so it was just like round after round after round of Salamangreat, every single round. I was like, I hate this. But it was like it was a structure deck built competitive deck that was really good. And so everybody did it because why wouldn't you? But that was really frustrating, if I'm being honest. Other than that, I had a very love-hate relationship with Gladiator Beast back in the GX era. But I don't know if there's one I really hate. But yeah, that's a good question, though. Appreciate it.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. I think we have.
What is it? It's Cornell. C-O-R.
I think we have maybe enough time to get to Bakura, and that's it, because we got to disperse the prizes too. So I'm going to cut it off right there.
Okay. So my question is, has there ever been a duel that you played that you made a major comeback from? Like you were on the verge of losing, but then somehow you made a comeback and turned the tides.
I'm sure there is. I can. So at locals, I was playing Little Night Orchest, and my opponent was playing Despots. If you're familiar with, and so Despots are an OTK deck where they just kill you arbitrarily for no reason, and so it was about, we were about to run into time, and I got Leo Dancer out, and Leo Dancer is a game ender, and so that was like my one example where I was like, if I didn't enter battle when I did, I would have lost, and so it was like that. Just quick, get it done, and so I managed to squeeze that comeback in the last minute.
Ah, cool.
I'm not that talented. I just remember the speed duel where I used Joey's really crappy skill. It didn't go well at all.
Yeah, in speed duels, Joey has like a total luck-based skill, and it's dumb.
Every luck-based thing that Joey had, I didn't get. So I was
What's your name?
sorry. I didn't do you any
We have
justice.
what's your first? Ryan B. Okay. We had another Ryan, so go ahead.
How much of Yu-Gi-Oh's current popularity can be attributed to Yu-Gi-Oh!
So that is a great question. I would say I wouldn't say that much of it at this point because I think a lot of the 20th anniversary stuff we can attribute to that. So I first noticed a lot of these high quality Yu-Gi-Oh cosplays, like the ones in the back of the room. I noticed those started coming out of the woodworks around 2016 when Dark Side Dimensions came out. And so I think we've moved past the abridged and into an era of nostalgia where people are going back to it as this retro thing that we all remember so well. And so I think from like 2008 to 2011, 12-ish was like peak abridged popularity. But I think that the abridged fan is a very different person than you guys in the room today. So I don't think it necessarily had a big correlation, but I think it's a good question.
I'm Casey. I guess my question is like, what would you recommend for someone who wants to get into TCG but has really only seen DM? Because I really don't know where to start.
So we do have Speed Duel format. Speed Duel format is really accessible if you have only seen the original anime. To jump in with the card game in its current state is a massive rabbit hole with link summoning. But I will say this. The game is cheaper to play than it's ever been on a competitive level. They are not afraid to reprint high impact cards, competitive cards, and they just released a product called Duel Devastator. It's like a $35 box it is full of competitively relevant cards. That would be a great thing to pick up. And like I said, we just came out of a format where you could buy 3 structure decks and have a tier 1 deck. So I would look for something like that. But the best advice I can give is watch what we call Yu-Gi-Tubers. People on YouTube that make Yu-Gi-Oh content because they talk about strategies, they talk about deck building techniques, they talk about the competitive format, what you're going to go up against. And the best thing is to just have a humble attitude about it. And if you, I guess the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG community is not known for being the most approachable and the card shop environment is kind of it doesn't have the best reputation. So I would challenge you to push through some of that banter and really just kind of make fun on your own. You know, have a good time on your own and don't let that culture hold you back. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of great products out there that will get you started.
Thank you.
And also you two, we're doing a little mini photo shoot after this. If you want to join us outside, we're going to do some Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay pictures.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren. Let's end this on something fun. No bars held, no strings attached. If you had one of the 7 Millennium items, which one would you have?
Ooh, the necklace. I want to see what's happening. I definitely.
Do we know what the scales do? Because did that ever appear in the anime?
It does. It does.
I don't remember what it does.
It does show up in the during the flashbacks. When but as far as the skills, it doesn't really do much. I think it's like something to do with judgment.
Okay, we gotta tighten this up. I'm gonna go with Rod because I relate to Sorcerer Seto, but
It also has a dagger, so you can stab people.
oh, I didn't. Don't tell me that. I didn't know that. All right.
It got censored.
So thank you for your question. All right, so time to raffle off the prizes. So for the keychains, the Yami and Dual Disc keychain, we have Katie. Thank you very much. For the Dark Neostorm Special Edition, we have Ethan. Bless your polls, good sir. Let's see what we have here. For the Legendary Decks 2, we have Lauren. There we go. And finally, for the last Kaiba Figma, the grandest of prizes, we have the first Ryan. Well deserved, good sir. Thank you guys so much for coming. We're going to go outside and do a little mini Yu-Gi-Oh photo shoot. I really appreciate your time, guys. We had an awesome time, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Here's another question. If you could make your own card, what theme would you do?
Sorry?
If you could make your own Yu-Gi-Oh